One of the things that I didn't know is that very shortly after Eisenhower, he was most of the 50s is when he was president for 2 terms. He was ranked by historians like the 30th best president, which is
contemporary historians in the 50s.
Contemporary historians.
Yeah.
Meaning, and that was true for I think decades after, which is to say the worst president, because there were only like 30 some odd presidents at that point. And today I went to Wikipedia and they have a conglomeration of all these different things. He is solidly 4 or 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's
So what switched? Why did his peers think he sucked and now we think he's great?
So people thought that he just did nothing because he wasn't big and blustery, didn't give big speeches, didn't really react to the Soviet Union when the U-2 spy craft fell over in Siberia. They shot it down. He did not make big pronouncements. Senator McCarthy was in. If you guys have heard of McCarthyism, he was pointing the finger saying that communists are everywhere, and Eisenhower never mentioned his name, not once. And so people got the impression that he just kind of laid back and things magically turned out good in the 50s without him contributing. And as they dug into like what he was saying behind the scenes in the plan, like this was very much planned. So the McCarthy thing, he's like, give him no air. The best thing for a senator is to have the president put his name in his mouth. So I will not speak that man's name. And that was part of his strategy. And he let him purposefully implode, on live television, basically, as they were doing hearings for some odd thing that I can't remember because I consumed the whole book in 7 days. The U-2 thing, he knew that Russia did not have the bombs that they were purporting to have. He knew that Sputnik was not a big deal. He knew all this, but
This
everyone
is 'cause he had
else
spy information that no one else had.
Yes, and he couldn't leak it, and he didn't say it. So he was telling people, "Look, it's okay." But they assumed that he was underreacting. But in terms of leadership principles, lots of interesting stuff, which is hard to do. He also was just very likely to give credit to other people. He did not blame other people and gave all the credit to other people, which meant that things went very well. And he did not look good.
Yeah.
He was also...
Well, I think that's easier to do in business than in politics.
Yes.
Like if you're Steve Ballmer, no one knows who you are, everyone knows who Bill Gates is. Dude has $40 billion.
Yeah, you're getting yours.
To me, that's ideal. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So in business, there's an incentive to just make things go well. But when you're president, your legacy is basically what you have, that and the state of the country you care about. So I feel like it's even harder to just lay back.
Yeah.
You don't get $40 billion coming your way.
And there would be things that would happen, like I forget exactly what they were, but right in an election year, and I think it was the Suez Canal crisis, where people were anticipating that the way he would respond to some particular international event would be dictated by the fact that he was up for re-election and it wasn't guaranteed. And again, it just is one biographer, one historian, but he was such a man of integrity that he's like, right's right. Doesn't matter if it's an election year. Like, can you imagine that?
Yeah, no, that's insane. Today, no one would do that.
But so he didn't support allies in the Suez Canal crisis when he thought that they did something wrong, which was basically we'd handed the Suez Canal over back to Egypt or had Britain do that. And then they staged this coup where they were going to take it back. And he's like, we're not supporting that. That's wrong. Like we gave this to them.
Was he a one-term president?
He was a 2-term president, and he was solidly 2-term. Yeah, he won very, very solidly. The public liked him a lot. The other thing that a lot of people, including myself, he was supreme commander of the Allied invasion in Germany. So he was General Eisenhower, 5-star general. He was the one that made the go no go call on D-Day. He had like one of the hardest decisions of the 20th century on June 5th, I think 1944 was, do we go today or there was like a 3-day window where they could do it and the weather wasn't certain. And it talks about how all these people are giving him different information. They're saying we can't do it. They're saying you cannot put the 101st Airborne, a huge part of the D-Day operation was we're going to land these paramilitary guys behind enemy lines. People are like, this is never going to work. This has never been done. And he made calls that historians have since vindicated by being like, the weather forecast, he got lucky, but he postponed 1 day. So he made the right call with the weather. They had a few hours of like, we can land without these boats getting destroyed. And they said the pivotal thing, like 80% of the success, at least according to this one particular person, was dropping these paratroopers behind enemy lines, which many people instructed him not to do. And afterwards, in his correspondence with these people, what he made clear, he's like, if this goes bad, this is only on my head. You've all done your job in advising me. And if it goes well, it was the guys on the front line. And so people obviously gave him credit. He was general. He was revered, especially during that period of time.
Oh, yeah.
But
if you get that letter, you love him. I mean, there's to some extent, there's public opinion that matters, but you also get in the military that Napoleon Bonaparte thing of just like, who do the troops think is king? Do they think it's the king or do they think it's the general? And if you get that letter of like, if this goes bad, it's on me. If this goes well, it's on you. You love the guy.
Yeah. So he did a couple of things that I'm trying to incorporate, and I don't do. I'm no Dwight Eisenhower, but things that I'm just like trying to tease the principles out. When they sent I believe it was the 101st Airborne, he stood on the runway till every single person left, which is to say, like, he looked all the guys in the eye, or many of them, that he was potentially sending to their death. Yeah. Like, he did not just sit at home. He was, he looked at a potential failure and its impact like squarely in the eye. He also wrote a letter in the event that it failed that was saying, this is solely my fault, and just kept that letter on his person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was like, this is 100% on me. My men, the men fought bravely. My advisors were amazing. They did everything they could. And just...
Does it talk about how he became like this? Like, what was his childhood like that made him this way?
Grew up in Kansas, bunch of brothers, Abilene, Kansas. You know, what's also interesting is like, his name is Eisenhower. He's like 2 generations removed from Germany. Yeah. And so there's these fascinating things, and it's inspiring. Like, that's what it is to be an American, to be 2 generations removed from this place, but to have belief in a set of ideals that run so much stronger than that, I don't know, 2 generation removed familial thing and that clan allegiance. So you're reading it, and then I can continue on and on, but just in terms of things that I found interesting from a leadership perspective, like, gave credit in a way that is really, really hard, I think, for me and many people to do. Accepted that extreme ownership, Jocko Willink stuff in a way that is ridiculous. Like, how could you... And I then bought extreme ownership, but it's like, look, it was the weather. You know what I mean? Like, what was I supposed to do? There was no chance. So I did get extreme ownership, and I want to talk about that. But additionally, the parallels for today made me feel a little bit better. So you've got Senator McCarthy with these, everybody's a secret communist, which kind of feels like everybody's a secret racist, or everybody's harboring these things, and we're trying to root out the person. And it's taking over this fervor in public life. And the quieter, non-radical voices like Dwight Eisenhower, who was always about the middle way, like, they're just not being heard with the same urgency.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is we don't have a presidential candidate who fits that description that you just said.
There's not a leader that's doing that. But what there was at the time was there was this, they didn't call it fake news, but there was, he thought that there was this reactionary Sputnik flies over and it's the end of the world news.
Sorry. I agree that I do think that the U.S. populace is largely moderate, quietly sane, like, not made of people who are racist or who see racism everywhere. I think that's the majority of the populace. But I'm saying both of our candidates do not fit the Eisenhower description you just gave of like quiet, calm, not like, they're both it's like, you're a socialist, you're a racist, like,
you're a fascist.
They're both doing the McCarthy. We have 2 McCarthys running for president, right?
Yes. And I forget, but I don't know how willing he was to do the attack stuff. It was just an interesting, fascinating dude. But yeah, we kind of lack that leadership. And the question is, how important is that leadership? Because when you get a leader like that, they say it's everybody else who did it anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, according to the leader who seems to be really good, he didn't even contribute. But is that just a trick that
I was literally texting with a friend of mine who I really respect, because he's quite smart and he's simultaneously very successful, but he doesn't follow any party line. And I was like, who are you voting for? Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out. And he said I'm voting for Biden because I don't like either of them. And I think Biden will just be hamstrung by a Republican political system.
Just gridlock.
And like, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
And he's like, I think they'd both be bad given absolute power, but you just put Biden in there and then like nothing happens for 4 years. And you hope that a better leader has come by 2024.
One of the things that I also thought was fascinating is, so Brown versus Board of Education says that it is separate but unequal is unconstitutional. You must integrate the schools in the South. So Little Rock drags their feet. He talks to the governor of Arkansas. He says, no, we're going to do it. We're going to integrate. They don't integrate. He's furious. But again, he's known for having this private temper that he like, and then quickly getting it under control and presenting a different public face.
A calm front.
A calm front. And so people for a long time thought that they didn't know his sympathies with regards to race because he didn't really give rousing speeches about it. But in this particular moment, he sent the 101st Airborne, the same group that was behind enemy lines at D-Day, into Little Rock to protect the Little Rock 9 who were going to this high school and to be like, you can no longer segregate these schools. And let me be clear, this is not the National Guard. This is not the DHS. This is like a wartime unit.
This is like, I think at the time, like close equivalent would be SEAL Team 6 in the sense that like you've heard it's not just a random unit. You've heard their name, you hold them in high esteem.
It would be the 101st Airborne, which is just like, this is big. This is a combat unit in wartime. And it just reminded me of the cries of fascist in Portland when there were DHS people arresting, and you can argue about what their conduct was, but it was the simple fact that there were federal goons in a state. And it was fascinating because it made it clear to me, one, your opinion of federal troops is very likely to lack principle. It's very likely to just be like, do I like what they're enforcing or don't I like what they're enforcing? And so that I thought was interesting. But his view was, this is a nation of laws. And the Supreme Court says that what you're doing is unconstitutional. And your police, your state troopers, and your National Guard are not doing this. So it is the federal government's duty to enforce the laws, which I just thought was a fascinating take because I imagine that a lot of the people that were very upset that Trump sent the DHS in to make arrests into Portland would have very much supported Eisenhower's use of the 101st Airborne to integrate.
Force integration.
Yes. So it just made it clear to me that there's, I think, generally a lack of principled argumentation occurring in politics today.
Oh, for sure.
You know, should we or should we not confirm Amy Coney Barrett? Well, you tell me who you voted for in 2016, and I'll tell you how you feel about election year election year nominations. It's like all the arguments that are trotted out, or many of the ones that I'm familiar with, seem to completely lack principle and totally.
What's funny is my only argument there is like, let's have a principle.
Yes, let's just have a principle.
Well, and again, I don't know how far back it goes, but my only thing is like, if in 2016 we weren't allowed to have a Supreme Court justice nominated during an election year, then in 2020 we should just have the same principle. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes, and to be clear, I don't know what the principle was in that year, and I've watched a bit of Steven Crowder arguing that it's been done 27 times before. Whatever.
Then in 2016, that
exactly.
This is what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how far the history goes, but either it's a mistake now, or it was a mistake to not do it in 2016. But you just need to have a rule that says presidents in election years can or cannot, and that shouldn't change based on your party and the party of the president. You should just have a belief about the Supreme Court and how it's meant to operate in our country. Because like when you don't do that, it's incredibly incendiary and divisive, and ultimately you will be unhappy because you like think it's like when Obama started, I think, doing more executive orders than ever before, and the Democrats were all about it. Then Trump came in, now there's more executive orders than ever before, and they're furious. And it's like, this is why you have to think with principles, because you didn't set up a rule that you liked. You just liked the outcome at the time. So that's how I feel about the Supreme Court thing. It's like, I don't care if we're allowed to do it in an election year or not, but it just seems crazy to me that someone would argue you can't in 2016 or you can in 2016 and then switch sides in 2020. And if you rule a country like that, you are destined to have so many problems.
Totally. And I think in terms of discourse, it makes it very tough to believe people when not everybody has been trained in logical argumentation, but you can sense when someone is always arguing for the Republican or Democrat standpoint, or in your own country, whatever the two parties are. And it just makes you distrust everything they say. So when they come out with a very interesting, novel piece of information, you're like, this is cherry-picked nonsense that I don't need to listen to because I already know which team they play for.
And I'll do a little bit of, I don't know if it's defending or maybe just a new angle, but we've talked about before, like not everyone is smart, and everyone, no matter how smart you are, largely believes what they heard 1,000 times as a child. So you have a populace that on average is of average intelligence, which means some people are below average. And then also all of us believe stuff that we were told growing up. And so it's like, yeah, we do not have a particularly philosophically sound voting base. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was just looking at other things from Eisenhower. He's just fascinating. So he selected, guess how many I just showed you? He selected 5 Supreme Court judges in his 8 years. 5. He decided which way the court went. But he made one, he was a Republican, a Democrat, purposefully, who became one of the longest sitting, staunchest Democrat people. Because he wanted the credibility of the court to represent the people. And he's like, look, it's not 5/9 Republican. It's like, that's not what it is. And so he purposely did that because he wanted it. He thought that it was very important that the court have credibility with the American people.
I don't know if maybe it's just because this is the time that I grew up in and I wasn't alive then, but that seems so like no one would do that. You know what I mean? I don't know if we've become stauncher in terms of how we identify, or we've started to hate the other side more, or what it is, but like that makes so much sense to me. But I feel like it would be almost unheard of for someone to do that today.
So I don't know, but I was looking at the rankings of presidents on Wikipedia, and they color it by quartile. And what you see is that there are like lone standouts, but oftentimes there are what historians have since deemed clusters together. So for many of the historians, they would say, and some argue, but like Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and even before Truman, FDR, like that was a solid, I don't know, like 20 plus year span of almost 30 years of like above average presidents.
Do you think it's because if there's a pendulum between the parties, like each side kept it tight, so the next side kept it tight?
No, it was weirdly enough, the Republicans, Eisenhower could have run as a Democrat or a Republican. Nobody knew what his politics were. He was a general. And there had been 20 years of Democrats, including 12 of FDR prior to that. So they hadn't won since like Harding or something.
Wait, how are there 12 of FDR?
He was a 3-term president. Dude, U.S. history is fascinating. My teacher never taught me any of this cool stuff. So there was no rule that you could only do 2 terms. It was precedent sent by George Washington, and several presidents prior to FDR ran for 3 and lost.
Oh, interesting.
So FDR was like a wartime thing, and he, according to historians, he's like the 3rd best president. Now, some people, Republicans today, hate him, but he was popular enough to win. And he was popular enough to kind of, then Truman took over after him. And Eisenhower was being courted by both Democrats and Republicans. Were like, whoever, this is the guy who won World War II.
Yeah.
Like whoever he runs
And he chose
for.
Republican just to be...
He chose Republican because he thought the 2-party system was necessary. And not like, oh, it's better than having a first past, or I guess, I don't know if it's non-first past the post, but he wasn't saying that the 2-party system is better than a 3 or 4 or 5-party system.
It's better than a 1-party system.
Yes, he's saying that it's better than a 1-party system. So he was a Republican because he thought that it was important that there was debate and disagreement. And again, just like a very principled, high integrity dude, at least according to this particular biographer, who happens to be an Eisenhower, but it's his granddaughter. But it seems that many historians have since come around to this as well. So just fascinating. And I'm watching him, and I'm not like him. At Apex Legends, if I lose, it is not my fault. It is everyone else's fault. Like, you didn't cover me. I said you blew it. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.